Nathan Rowe and the Thief Who Left the Money. Welcome to Detective Tales. I'm Jason Fraser. Tonight, you're about to hear an original modern mystery featuring Detective Nathan Rowe, set in a small paper mill town on the Kennebec, where a quiet library, a private reading program, and one ordinary November night leave behind a question nobody realizes they should be asking. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy these stories, following the channel and leaving a comment helps more than you'd think. One quick note. The original language of this story is English, but YouTube's automatic dubbing can translate it into your own language if you'd rather listen that way. Now, let's begin. Part 1. Gil Ouellette had gone up the back stairs of the Aldrich Falls Free Library 81 times, and he had never once come through the front door. That was not habit. It was the whole architecture of the thing. The library was a Carnegie building put up in 1912 with money from away and granite from Deer Isle, and it had a wide front stair facing Bridge Street where the whole town could see you standing on it, and it had a narrow enclosed flight at the back that came down into a rear hall and out onto a gravel lot behind the boiler room where nobody could see anything at all. Verna Cyr had understood the difference in her first week on the job, 22 years ago, and had run everything she did out of the back of that building ever since. It was the 14th of November, 10 minutes to 6, and full dark. The Kennebec ran black and loud under the Bridge Street span. Up the hill, the mill made the noise it made every hour of every day, the long sighing hiss off the number 4 machine that a man stops hearing after the first year and never really stops hearing at all. Gil parked at the end of the gravel on the far side of the dumpster and sat a minute with the engine off and his hands on his knees. 11 days. He had driven past 4 times in 11 days without stopping. He got out. The back door still had the same broken spring latch it had had for 2 years, and he still had to lift it half an inch on the hinge to make the bolt clear, and the fact that the door was still exactly as wrong as it had always been nearly turned him round and sent him home. Instead, he went up. The back stair was narrow enough that a big man had to angle his shoulders, and Gil was a big man. 43, 6'2", built by 21 years of pulling bearings and setting couplings on a paper machine. Thick through the forearms and the neck, a little wrecked in the lower back, hands that had stopped fully closing somewhere around his 35th birthday. He went up sideways, the way he always did, and at the top he reached out without looking and put the light on. The tutoring room was the old trustee's room. Long oak table with 100 years of elbows in the finish, whiteboard on a stand that Ev Sabine had built out of scrap and hinges, 6 mismatched chairs, a radiator under the window that knocked all winter like something wanted out of it, and against the north wall the 4-drawer oak file cabinet with the Friends of the Library cash box sitting on top of it where it had sat since before Gil was ever in that room. He stood in the doorway a while. It was the first time he had been in a room she wasn't in. What he had come for was his cards. Verna had made them out of index stock, 140 of them by now, a word on the front in her big, careful hand, and on the back a sentence with that word in it, and every one of those sentences was about something that existed. Not the cat sat on the mat. Verna didn't do the cat. On the back of bearing it said, "The bearing ran hot because nobody greased it." On the back of lockout it said, "You put your own lock on the box, and you keep the key in your own pocket." And she had written that one out in front of him, and looked at him over her glasses, and said, in the flat way she said things she meant, that it was the most important sentence in the pack. They lived in the drawer, because he had a wife and 2 daughters, and none of the 3 of them knew, and 140 index cards is not a thing you hide in a house. He crossed the room and pulled drawer 1. It came out to the stop, and it shut easy. Gil stood with his hand on the pull and did not for a second know what was wrong with him. Then he did. He pushed it in and drew it out and pushed it in again, and it went home on the ball of his thumb, light as a kitchen drawer, and it had never in 2 years gone in on anything less than a shove with the heel of his hand. That drawer was packed. It had always been packed, so full that the folders stood straight against each other with no lean anywhere in them, so full that Verna used to say she was going to have to get elected to something to get a 5th drawer out of the town. He opened it all the way and looked in. Now, Gil Ouellette could not read 1 tab in that drawer. Not one. 2 years of Thursdays had got him as far as a work order at the mill, with his finger under the line and his back to the room, and a good day in July when he read a whole paragraph of the newspaper out loud to Verna, and had to stop halfway and put his hand over his eyes. The tabs in that drawer were a foot of small handwriting, and they meant nothing to him at all. He did not need them to. He had never navigated that drawer by reading it. He navigated it the way he navigated the inside of a gearbox in the dark, which is by where things are. His cards were in a rubber-banded block right at the front of the drawer, tucked in behind the first folder, which was a fat one Verna had reinforced along the spine with strapping tape because it was coming apart. The fat, taped one was still there. His cards were still behind it. He put them in his coat pocket. Then he counted the drawer, front to back, with 2 fingers, the way you count anything. He did it 3 times because after the second time he sat down. He had counted that drawer before. In February, when he had been stuck 6 weeks on words he already had and was ready to quit and had said so, Verna had pulled the whole drawer out onto the table and made him count the folders, and then made him count the ones he could put a name to off the shape of the tab alone without sounding a letter of it. The answers had been 31 and 4, and she had said a thing about what 4 out of 31 meant in February of a man's second year that he had not repeated to anybody since and did not intend to. 31. There were 27. He went through it again, slower, lifting each tab with his thumb and letting it fall, and the count came out the same, and the whole shape of the drawer was wrong, besides the number. The folders had slack in them now. The ones near the back had gone over at an angle, like a fence after a frost. 4 folders, out of a locked cabinet in a locked building. Gil sat back in one of the mismatched chairs and looked at it a long time. Then he looked up, because his eye had gone there twice already without his letting it. The friends of the library kept the cash box for the book sale, and the coffee can, and the fines Verna never collected. Grey steel, a slot in the lid, about the size of a loaf of bread, sitting on top of the file cabinet at eye level. The lid was up. The lid was always up. The little key had been lost some time before Gil ever came into that room, and nobody had ever got round to it. And there was, that evening, $340 in it, in 5s and 10s and 1s, held down by a smooth grey stone off the river. Somebody had come into this building with a key. Somebody had stood right here, and had gone through a drawer of paper from the front of it to the back, and had taken 4 folders that were not worth a nickel to a living soul, and had put the drawer back, and had walked out past $340 sitting open in a box at the height of his own chest. Gil put his hand flat on the cabinet. He was in a room he was not supposed to be seen in, holding a block of index cards he could not explain, looking at a thing he could not report to one person in Aldrich Falls, without telling them first why he had a key to the back door of a library on a Thursday night. Nadine Pomerleau was at the circulation desk with her coat already on when he came down the front stairs, which was itself a thing that happened perhaps twice a year. She was 38 and had been the director for 5, and had come in from a bigger system downstate with ideas about outreach and a laminator, and the town had spent 2 years deciding whether to like her and had come down, on balance, in favor. She had cried at the funeral in a way people had noticed and been decent about. "Gil," she said, and stopped, because Gil was standing at the bottom of the front stairs and not the back ones. He had rehearsed it in the car, and none of the rehearsal was any use. "The drawer in the tutoring room," he said. "The top one. There's 4 folders gone out of it." Nadine put her bag down. "Gone how?" "Gone. It had 31 in it. It's got 27. "How do you know how many it had?" And there it was, right away, in the first 30 seconds, the way it always was. Gil looked at the desk, and at the returns cart, and at a poster about a book club, and back at her. "Because I counted them in February," he said. "With Verna, in a lesson." He watched her not understand, and then understand. To her credit, and he thought about it several times afterwards and always came down the same way, she did not do one of the things he had braced for. She did not soften her voice. She did not say, "Oh, Gil." She picked her keys up off the desk and said, "Show me," and went up the back stairs ahead of him 2 at a time. "What's supposed to be in it?" Gil said. "The program's paper. Grants, the supply orders, the bequests, the practice books she wouldn't let out of the building." Nadine went along the tabs with her fingers, and Gil watched her eyes move and thought, not for the first time, how fast that is for other people, how they just look at a thing and have it. Anything missing? She got to the back of the drawer, went to the front and did it again. I don't know, she said. You don't know? Gil, I have never once been in this drawer. She straightened up. Verna did her own filing, all 22 years of it. She lettered every tab in this building by hand. Go look at the local history room. It's the same handwriting on every box up there. There's no list. There's no inventory. There's no shared drive because she wouldn't use one. If 4 folders are gone out of here, the only person on earth who could tell you which 4 is... She stopped. Yeah, Gil said. The money's still there, Nadine said in a different voice. I know it. The money's right there. Chief Bernadette Fortin ran the Aldrich Falls Police Department. Herself, 2 full-time officers, and a part-timer who did the school crossing, out of 2 rooms in the town office with a scanner on the shelf and a coffee maker that had come out of somebody's camp. She was 51, she had grown up 4 miles up the Anson Road, and she took the report the next morning at 9 in a way that was perfectly courteous and perfectly unpersuaded. No forced entry, she said, writing. No. Back door was locked when you got there Thursday. Locked? And the cabinet was locked. The cabinet was locked, Nadine said. I unlocked it Thursday with Verna's key. Fortin looked up. Where's Verna's key live? On a hook inside the knee-hole of the desk, left-hand side up under the top. She's had it there since before me. Who knows that? Anybody who ever watched her work in that room. Fortin wrote that down too, and then put her pen across the pad and sat back, and said the thing she had plainly been thinking since the second sentence. Nadine. Gil. She said their names carefully, both of them, and she did not look at Gil any harder than she looked at Nadine, which he appreciated. I'll take the report, and I'll open a file. But I'm going to say the obvious thing once, and then I'll stop saying it. Verna had people coming up those stairs on private business for 22 years. She's gone 11 days. There is a person in this town who is sitting up at night thinking about a piece of paper with their name on it in a building they can't get into anymore, and thinking about who's going to be the one to clean that cabinet out. She let that sit. That's not a burglary, she said. That's somebody taking their own life back out of a drawer. And if that's what it is, then me making a noise about it is the single worst thing I could do to them. Gil looked at the floor. Nadine said, And the other 3 folders? Grab to bury the one they came for, Fortin said. That's what I'd do. You don't take one thing out of a drawer, you take 4, and then nobody's looking at the one. Nadine, if it was the money, I'd be up there with a print kit. It's not the money. It's not the money, Nadine agreed. Fortin turned the pad round and slid it across for Nadine to sign, and while Nadine was signing it, she said in the same tone, How'd she come to be up there on a Sunday night anyway? Paperwork, Nadine said. She came in most Sunday evenings. 6 till 8, 8:30. Building's dead, phone doesn't ring. She'd been doing it for years. And the light. The light was off. Fortin took the pad back and looked at it without reading it. The medical examiner's office in Augusta had signed it out 10 days before. Verna Louise Cyr, 63, accidental fall down an unlit interior stair, blunt force injury to the head and neck, no findings inconsistent with the scene. She had gone down the back stairs sometime after 7 on the evening of Sunday, the 3rd of November, with a banker's box of quarter-end returns in both arms, in the dark, at the end of a long day, in a building nobody else was in. The box was at the bottom with her, and the contents of it had lain across the rear hall floor for 12 hours before Nadine Pomerleau opened up on the Monday morning. Nobody had disbelieved it, because there had not been one thing in it to disbelieve. All right, Fortin said. I'll have a look at the door. Nathan Rowe came up from Augusta on the Monday. He came because Bernie Fortin had called the Major Crimes Unit on the Friday afternoon and said, without any decoration on it, that she had a woman dead at the bottom of a stair in a building where somebody with a key had also gone through a drawer, that she personally thought the 2 things had nothing to do with each other, that she had been wrong before, and that she would rather be told she was wasting the state's time than find out in March that she hadn't been. Rowe liked the call. He had taken worse ones from people who were more certain. He got to Aldrich Falls at 10 and did not go to the police department first. He went to the library and asked Nadine Pomelow for the keys and for the building to himself for 2 hours, and she gave him both without a question, and he walked it. The front stairs, the stacks, the children's corner with its rug worn to the backing. The local history room upstairs, where Nadine had been right about the boxes. Everyone lettered in the same big square hand, 40 years of the Aldrich Falls Advertiser, the Mill's own photographs, a shelf of high school yearbooks. The tutoring room, where he stood at the file cabinet and looked at the cash box for a while without touching it. Then the back stairs, 4 times, up and down. It was not a good stair. It was a 1912 stair, steep, boxed in on both sides with beaded board, 17 risers, a handrail on the left going down that ended 18 inches short of the bottom because somebody had cut it back to clear a door casing in the 50s. A landing at the top the size of a card table, a bare bulb in a porcelain fixture on the ceiling of it, a toggle switch on the wall beside it. At the bottom, a rear hall, a door to the boiler room, a door to the lot, and a coat hook. Rowe stood in the rear hall and turned all the way round, twice, with his hands in his pockets. Then he went back up and found Nadine at the desk. "Who keeps the building?" he said. "Ev Sabine." "Who is Ev Sabine?" Nadine looked at him the way people look at you when you have asked something that has never before required an answer. "Sabine Memorials, out on the Anson Road. He cuts the stones. His father cut them and his grandfather cut them." She thought about it. "He does the boiler here. He's done the boiler here since before I was born, I think. He built the whiteboard stand and he built the shelves in the tutoring room and he rehung the front doors 2 years ago when the frost took the sill. He's on the town's key list. He's on the key list for the town office and the Grange and I'd guess the church." "Paid?" "For the boiler. $60 a month, which was set in about 1994 and which he has twice refused to have raised." She said it with something in her voice. "He's the one who cut Verna's marker." "Already?" "He had it cut in 3 days, Nadine said. It can't go in the ground till the frost comes out, so it's sitting on his bench. He wouldn't take anything for it either. Meg had to fight him, and she lost." Verna Cyr had asked him to drive her out to the shop on the Tuesday morning, and Rowe had said yes without thinking about whether it was his job because it plainly wasn't, and it plainly was. She was 34, she taught 4th grade in Winslow. She had been in Aldrich Falls 12 days and was going to have to go back on the Sunday. She had her mother's chin and none of her mother's stillness. She talked the whole way out the Anson Road, the house, the paperwork, a neighbor who kept bringing casseroles in dishes that had to be returned, and stopped 200 yards short of the shop and did not start again. Sabine Memorials was a low white building with a metal roof, and the yard behind it was the thing you looked at. 40 or 50 stones standing in rows on gravel, granite mostly, grey and black, and a pink with a lot of orange in it. Some polished on 2 faces and some on one, every one of them blank. A flatbed truck with a boom on it sat at the end of the row with its outriggers down. There was a low, steady noise from inside the building and a smell in the cold air like a wet sidewalk. Everett Sabine came out wiping his hands. A big man, too, bigger than Gil, but built long instead of thick, with the forward hunch men get from 30 years of leaning over a bench. 59. Grey hair, cut short by somebody who was not a barber, clean-shaven, glasses pushed up on his head, a canvas apron white with dust to the knees. He shook Meg's hand in both of his, and did not say he was sorry for her loss, which Rowe noticed, and said instead, "She was in here in September about the Hutchins boys' stone, sat right there and told me the lettering was too tight." Meg laughed once, wetly. "Was it?" "It was," Ev said. He took them inside. The shop was one long room, cold, lit by fluorescents, with a sandblast cabinet at one end, and a bench down the whole of one wall and a rack of stencil in rolls. On the bench, face up on a bed of old carpet, was a piece of the pink granite about 2.5 feet by 3, polished on the front face and rough on the sides, and it was finished, and it said CYR, and under it Verna Louise, and the dates, and under that 4 words. Meg made a small sound. Ev went and stood at the other end of the bench and let her be. After a while she said, "I never gave you the words." "You gave them to me the Wednesday," Ev said. "At the church. You wrote them on the back of the order of service, and you gave it to me, and you said, 'Is that too many?' And I said it wasn't." "I don't remember doing that." "No," Ev said. "You wouldn't." He reached under the bench and came up with a piece of card and put it on the polished face, and it was the back of an order of service, folded, with 4 words on it in ballpoint in Meg's handwriting. "I kept it," he said. "I keep them all." Then he did something that Rowe watched and filed away without at the time knowing that he was filing anything at all. He took a pencil out of the apron and turned the card over to a clean corner and held it out to her. "Write them again," he said. "For me. Same 4 words. They're right there. Write them again." Meg wrote them again. Ev took the card back and held it up at arm's length in the fluorescent light and looked at it for a good 5 seconds. "Now read me what you wrote," he said. "Ev, humour me." She read the 4 words out loud. "Again!" She read them again. He put the card down on the bench, took a flip phone out of the apron pocket, opened it, and photographed the card. Then he closed the phone and put it away and said, "I cut a wrong name once. 1981, a woman named Roberge, and I put an S on the end of it because the fellow who wrote it out for me had a hook on his letters. Stone went in the ground on a Saturday. Her sister found it Sunday." He picked up a rag and started on his hands again. "I've been in that cemetery 4,000 times since, and I still don't walk down that row. So no. I'd sooner cut my own hand off than go by what I think it says." "That's why you were on at Mum about the Hutchins lettering," Meg said. "That was different. That was just ugly." Rowe went out into the yard while Meg stayed inside. He walked the rows. It was cold and clear, and there was ice in the gravel where the outriggers had stood. The stones had no signage on them of any kind, no cards, no price tags, no stock numbers. What they had, he saw when he got down on his heels at the end of a row, was a chisel mark on the back edge of each base. 1 notch, 2 notches, a notch and a cross, and a chip of the same stone wired to the corner with a twist of copper. He was still down there when Ev came out to bring a chair off the porch in out of the weather. "You don't label them," Rowe said. "Wouldn't help me any," Ev said. "Stone's stone. You want to know what it does wet? You got to look at it wet." He carried the chair up under the eave. "Anything you write on a piece of granite comes off in 1 winter, mister. The notch don't come off." Rowe went back to the library at the end of the afternoon and let himself in with Nadine's key. The building at 5 o'clock in the middle of November was already dark. He put on the lights in the tutoring room and stood at the cabinet and opened the cash box and counted it, note by note, onto the top of the cabinet, and it came to $340 exactly, in 5s and 10s and a fold of 1s, with a smooth grey riverstone lying on top of it to keep it from blowing about. He put it back and closed the lid, and then opened the lid again, because the lid was supposed to be up. Somebody had stood exactly here, at the height of a man's chest, 18 inches from his hand, $340 in an open steel box with no lock in it, in an empty building, with all night to do it in. And he had gone through a drawer of paper instead. Part 2. The thing about the stairwell light was that everybody had already explained it. Rowe had heard the explanation 4 times in 2 days without anybody meaning to give it to him. Bernie Fortin said the light was off the way you say a fact that closes a subject. Nadine said it with a wince, as a small institutional guilt. An old building, an old fixture, a woman with her arms full. The report out of Augusta had it in 1 clause. Meg said it in the car coming back from the shop, in the voice of somebody who has decided to be reasonable about a thing that is going to be underneath the rest of her life. She went down in the dark, that's all it was. She'd done it 100 times. Rowe went back on the Wednesday morning with a flashlight and a screwdriver and did the thing nobody had done, which was ask why it was off. The fixture at the top landing was a porcelain keyless, painted over twice, with a 60-watt bulb in it. He took the bulb out, looked at the filament, put it back, and turned the switch on. And the light came on, and he worked it 4 more times, and it worked 4 more times. He unscrewed the switch plate. The wiring behind it was cloth-covered, spliced once with a wire nut sometime long after the war, and it went up into the ceiling and nowhere else. Then he went down the 17 risers into the rear hall and turned all the way round. Beaded board to shoulder height, plaster above it. The boiler room door with a hasp on it. The back door with the broken spring latch, and beside it, at hand height, one switch, which he flipped, and which put on the porch light out over the gravel. Coat hooks, a radiator, an extension ladder lying on its side along the base of the wall under the hooks, aluminum, 24 feet, with a name burned into the rail in half-inch letters. Nothing else. No switch, no plate, no plaster patch where a plate had been. He went down on one knee with the flashlight and ran it along the beaded board on both sides of the stair mouth. At every height a hand would go, and there was nothing there, and there never had been. One switch, at the top. He climbed back up and stood on the little landing the size of a card table, and worked the toggle with his thumb a few times on and off, listening to the click of it go out into the empty building. If the light was off, then either Verna Cyr had gone down 17 steep, boxed-in risers in the black dark, with a banker's box in both arms and no rail at the bottom of the run, or somebody had been standing where Rowe was standing afterwards. He spent the rest of Wednesday asking one question of 3 people separately, in a way that gave none of them the shape of it. Nadine, at the desk, over a returns cart. "Ever come down those back stairs in the dark?" "God, no. Nobody does. You'd break your neck." She heard herself say it and stopped with a book in her hand. "That's not... I didn't mean..." "Did she?" "Verna? Verna wouldn't come down those stairs with the light off if the building was on fire. She was religious about it. There's a sign up there. She made it herself." There was, too. A piece of card taped to the beaded board above the switch, in the same big square hand as 40 years of local history boxes. Rowe went up and read it. "Light on first." "She put that up for the Thursday people," Nadine said. "She used to stand at the top and watch them go all the way down before she'd shut it off." "She'd shut it off after them." "After the last one. Every time. Gil, in the parking lot at the mill at the change of shift, with the whole hill smelling of steam. 2 years. She never let me start down till she'd had that light on. She'd say it before I was out of the chair." "Ever see her go down first?" Gil thought about it properly, the way he thought about everything. "She went first if she was carrying. Light on, down, put her stuff in the car, back up. She wouldn't have gone in the dark. She's the one made the sign." And Bernie Fortin, in the town office with the scanner muttering on the shelf. "Off? Sure it was off. Nadine found her at 8:05 in the morning, and that stairwell was black as a pocket with the whole rest of the building light." "Why?" "Because there's one switch, and it's at the top." Fortin put her coffee down. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "There's a version of that where the bulb was out. The bulb's good. You checked. 5 times. There's a version where she went down for something, came back up, put it off, and went down again." "There is," Rowe said. "That's a real one. Then the box is at the bottom, and she's at the bottom, and there's nothing at the top, and it works." He turned his hat over in his hands. "Bernie, I'm not telling you there's a homicide in your town. I'm telling you that switch has to have a hand on it, and every hand I know about was at the bottom of the stairs." The office of the chief medical examiner did not enjoy being telephoned about a case it had signed out 11 days earlier, and then, having listened to the whole of it, enjoyed it a good deal more than it had expected to. The injuries were consistent with the fall, and would go on being consistent with the fall. There was nothing on Verna Cyr's body that said pushed, and nothing that said tripped, because there almost never is. What there was, in the file, was a scene description that had assumed a woman alone. On Thursday, the 21st of November, the manner of death on Verna Cyr was amended from accident to undetermined, which is not an accusation, does not make a headline, and changes everything. It also released her effects. Bagged in Augusta on the 4th of November and untouched since, the contents of the left-hand pocket of a grey wool cardigan. A paper handkerchief. A roll of wintergreen mints. $11. A photograph of 2 children on a dock, and a small brass key with a hole in the bow, 3/4 of an inch long, of the kind that fits a piece of office furniture and nothing else on God's earth. 4 drawers, Rowe said. 4 drawers, Nadine agreed. Then they had the tutoring room to themselves on the Friday afternoon, and the radiator was knocking under the window. Rowe had drawer 1 open on its stop. This is the one everybody's been in. This is the one she was in front of people, every Thursday for 22 years. The readers are in it. The workbooks she'd never let go out of the building because they cost $40 apiece and they walk. Nadine put a hand on the drawer front. And the program's business. Grants, the supply orders, the state reporting, the 2 bequests. It's a mess, and it's her mess. It isn't in any order I can see. Rowe had established that much on his own. Alphabetically, the drawer was nonsense. It ran from a fat, strapping-taped folder at the very front marked Practice. Do not take out of this room, through a run of newsletters from the 1990s about a third of the way back, to a wad of unlabeled carbon paper that had probably been in there since the Ford administration. Whatever the order was, it was hers, and it had probably been most used at the front, dead at the back in about 2002, and had been silting up ever since. 2, he said, and pulled it. 2 was book sale, 3-ring binders, a bag of pencils. 4 was empty, but for a broken stapler and a stack of paper towels. 3 would not open. That one's locked, Nadine said. With what? I've no idea. Rowe got the evidence envelope out of his coat and shook the brass key onto the oak table. Drawer 3 came out on its stop with the sound old furniture makes, and what was in it was 9 manila folders, and every one of them had a tab, and on every tab, in the big square hand that was on every box in the local history room and on the sign above the light switch, there was a letter and a number and nothing else. R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, R6, R7, R8, R9. Nadine did not say anything at all. Rowe looked at the drawer for a while. Then he said, Where's the list? There isn't one. There's a list. Detective, there is not a list. Her arms were folded, and she was not being difficult. She was being accurate, and it cost her. That is the whole program. That is the entire architecture of the thing. She wouldn't put a name on a sign-in sheet. She wouldn't put a name in the annual report. The annual report says 9 adult learners, and this town has voted money on that number for 20 years without one soul ever asking her which 9. She scheduled them so that no 2 of them were ever in this building at the same hour. She had them come up the back. She had me stay downstairs on Thursday nights, and I'm the director. Nadine looked at the drawer of numbers. I asked her once, when I first came, whether we oughtn't to have the roster somewhere in case she got hit by a bus. And she said, and this is close to word for word, I've had 3 weeks to think about it, she said. The only safe place for a name is inside your own head. And the numbers. In her head. 22 years. 22 years. Rowe put both hands on the edge of the drawer. 9 folders. 9 private lives, 4 inches thick, sitting in a box of oak with a dead woman's key in his hand. He could read the lot of it in 90 minutes. He pushed the drawer shut and turned the key and put it back in the envelope. Not yet, he said. The extension ladder in the rear hall had been burned into the rail, and Rowe had been carrying that around for 2 days before he found out how it got there. It got there because Everett Sabine had lent it to the library in September to take the storm sash down off the second-floor windows, and it had lived in the rear hall ever since, standing up against the wall by the boiler room door, until the evening of Sunday the 3rd of November, when somebody had laid it down flat along the base of the wall under the coat hooks, out of the way you do with a ladder in a hall people walk through. Nadine remembered it standing on the Friday. It was lying down on the Monday morning. Who moved it? I have no idea. Rowe found out at 2:30 on the Monday afternoon on the Sander line at Kennebec Tissue, where the noise was such that he and the man he had come to see had to go and stand in the doorway of the finishing shed in the cold to hear each other. Wade Vachon was 46 and small and quick, with a face that had been broken on the right side a long time ago and had set a little off. He had a hairnet over a ball cap and safety glasses pushed up on the brim, and he had been on that line 8 years. "Library," he said. "No. You weren't at the library?" "I ain't been in that library since 6th grade. He said it fast and flat and did not blink, and it was the speed of it that did it. Nobody answers a question about a library that fast. Rowe took out his phone, turned it round, and showed him a photograph of a 24-foot aluminum extension ladder lying on its side in a rear hall with a name burned into the rail. Wade looked at it for a second and a half. "That's Ev's," he said. "It is." "So?" "So on the Friday it was standing against the wall by the boiler room door, and on Monday morning it was lying flat under the coat hooks, which is where you put a ladder if you're a man who's been told not to leave one standing where a kid could get at it. I've been in that hall 4 times now, Mr. Vachon, and I don't believe a woman of 63 carrying a banker's box laid that ladder down." Wade took the glasses off the cap and put them on and took them off again. "I want to go back in," he said. "You're not under arrest and I'm not going to stop you," Rowe said. "I'll be at your place at 6. Wade Vachon lived in the downstairs half of a 2-family on Water Street with a plough-wrecked fence and a satellite dish bolted to the porch roof. He let Rowe in and did not offer him a chair, and then, halfway through his first sentence, went and got him one from the kitchen anyway. "All right," he said. "Yeah. 6:40, 7:15. I put the ladder down and I left." "Doing what?" "Ev asked me to look in on it. The sash was down, the ladder was still there. He'd been meaning to get it for a month, and he's in and out of that place anyhow for the boiler. He said if I was going by, would I lay it down out of the way so nobody put a foot through the glass on the boiler room door." Wade shrugged with one shoulder. "So I went by, laid it down, left." "Why lie about it?" "Because I done 4 years in Warren for going into a camp on Emden Pond in 2004 and taking a chainsaw and a television," Wade said. "And I have been out 16 years, and I have been on that Sander line 8 of them, and I have got a landlord who reads the court news. And you come up to me in my place of work and ask me about a building where a woman fell down a set of stairs." He said it without heat. That was the thing Rowe noticed and kept. No heat in it anywhere. A man reciting the shape of his own life. "Who else was in the building?" "Nobody. Her car was out back. Light on upstairs. I never went up, I never called out, and I wasn't in there 90 seconds. "After that?" Wade looked at the window. "Here." "Anybody with you?" "No." "When did you hear she died?" Wade took slightly too long over it. "Monday," he said. "Monday morning, it went round. Rowe wrote nothing down, which he had learned over 20 years is worth a good deal more than writing something down." "You knew Verna Cyr." "Everybody knew Verna Cyr." "You had words with her in September." Wade's jaw moved. "My sister's boy got put off the computers over a laptop that went missing out of the workroom, and he never took it, and they found it in October under a box in the same workroom, and not one person said a word to him after." He looked up. "So yeah, I had words with her. In the hallway there in front of the whole desk, and I said things about her I'd not care to have repeated. She stood and took it, and then she wrote him a letter." "A letter?" "Saying she'd been wrong and she was sorry, and would he come back and use the computers?" Wade rubbed his mouth with the back of his hand. "He's 19. He's still got it in his room." Rowe let a moment go by. "Mr. Vachon, who gave you your first job when you came out of Warren?" "Ev Sabine," Wade said. 2009. Yard work and setting foundations. 2 years, till the mill took me on." He said it with no weight on it at all, the way a man says a thing everybody in town already knows. Nadine Pomerleau had one thing she had not said. and it took Rowe until the following Wednesday to find the edge of it, and when he did, it turned out to be nothing, and to matter enormously. What he had first were the September minutes. The trustees met the second Tuesday of the month. The 10th of September ran to 2 pages, and there was a paragraph in it about Aldrich Falls reads, a proposal from the director that the program be transferred to Somerset Adult and Community Education in Skowhegan at the end of the fiscal year on grounds of insurance, staffing continuity, and the cost of the workbooks. And a response from the coordinator, minuted at Verna Cyr's own request, in her own words, of which the last sentence was, "Nobody in this town is going to drive 22 miles to a strange building to admit a thing they have not admitted to their own wives." "That's a fight," Rowe said. "That's a fight," Nadine said. "We had it 4 times, twice in public." "Who won?" "Nobody. It was going back to the board in January." Her hands were flat on the counter. "And I want to say the next part badly, so I'll say it, and you can do what you like with it. I was right about the insurance, and I was right about the money, and she was right about everything that actually mattered, and I knew she was right in September, and I brought it anyway, because that is my job. And now she's dead, and there are 9 people in that program that nobody on this earth can find, and I have been sick about it for 3 weeks. Rowe let that be. Then he said, "What else?" "What?" "Ms. Pomelow, you've been carrying one more thing since the day I got here. It's on you every time I come through that door." Nadine went to the desk drawer and got out a printed email and put it on the counter. It was dated the 6th of November, 3 days after Verna died. It was from the Maine Adult Education Association. It acknowledged receipt of a nomination from the Aldrich Falls Free Library for the Adult Learner of the Year award, asked whether the coordinator would be attending the ceremony in Augusta in March, and did not contain the name of a single learner anywhere on it. "That's it," she said. "That's the whole of it. It came to my address because the library's address is my address. I read it, and I thought, she's put somebody up for it and never breathed a word, and I sat here and cried, and then I put it in a drawer because I could not think what on earth to do with it. There's no name on it. I don't know who she nominated. I don't know whether the person she nominated even knows." She looked down at the email. Verna would carry a person's name to the grave if she thought the name was a shame. But if she got proud of somebody, she could push. She could decide fear was the last lesson left to teach. I fought her about that too. Rowe read it twice. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it isn't anything," Nadine said. "Is it?" He checked her anyway that week, because he checked everybody, and it took him 1 morning and a telephone. She had driven her son to a hockey tournament in Bangor on the Sunday afternoon and stayed over, and there was a hotel folio and 2 fuel receipts and 11 other parents and a rink, and she was 90 miles up the road when Verna Cyr went down those stairs. When she found out that he had gone and looked, she said she was glad he had, and Rowe believed her, and struck a line through the only person in Aldrich Falls who had ever had a reason on paper to want that program out of that building. The mill had a camera on the gate that watched the approach road, because the approach road was the bridge, and the bridge was how everything came into Aldrich Falls and how everything left. It kept 30 days. Rowe was inside it by 5 days when he asked, and one of Bernie Fortin's 2 officers spent a shift with it and produced a typed list, single-spaced, of everything that crossed the Bridge Street span in either direction between 7:30 and 9 o'clock on the evening of Sunday the 3rd of November. There were 11. 7:34. Town plough truck, westbound, no plough, dry road. 7:41. Silver sedan, eastbound. 7:52. Flatbed with boom, dark color, westbound. 8:02. Pickup, white, westbound. 8:14. Pickup, white, eastbound. Same vehicle. 8:19. Silver sedan, westbound. Same vehicle as 7:41. 8:33. SUV, eastbound. 8:41. Flatbed with boom, dark color, eastbound. Same vehicle as 7:52. 8:47. Motorcycle, westbound. 8:52. SUV, westbound. 8:58. Sedan, dark, eastbound. Rowe read it in the town office with a cup of the camp coffee and got nothing whatever out of it, which is what an honest man gets out of 11 vehicles crossing a bridge in a town of 2,900 people on a Sunday night. He wrote no plate reads, Camera sits 200 yards off at the bottom, put it in the folder, and turn to something else. He met Everett Sabine properly for the second time on the last Friday in November in the library's boiler room at 7 in the morning, because the radiators were knocking and Nadine had called him and he had come. The boiler room was warm and low and smelled of oil and rust. Ev had a bucket and a length of hose and a key on a string, and he was bleeding the second-floor loop, and he did it standing at an odd stoop with his ear turned to the pipe, listening rather than looking. "You can hear it," Rowe said. "You can hear it better than you can see it. Air's got a note. Water's got another one." They talked about the building for 10 minutes, and Rowe let it run, because Ev Sabine knew that building the way a man knows a boat he built himself, and because there was nothing in the world Rowe wanted more that morning than to know how a person got in and out of it. 2 front doors, 1 back. 6 ground-floor windows painted shut in 1978. A coal chute filled with concrete in the 80s. The back door with the spring latch, which Ev said he'd have right in an afternoon if the trustees would ever spend $11 on a strike plate. "How many keys to the back?" "Nadine. The chief's got one in the box at the town office. The cleaner. Me." Ev straightened and wiped the key on his apron. "There's a couple out there somewhere from before. Doris Neal had one when she did the flowers, and she's been dead a while." Rowe had a photocopy of the town's key list in his coat. He took it out and unfolded it and held it across. "Yeah, would you look at that and tell me if there's anybody on it you'd take off?" Ev looked at the paper without taking it. "Eyes are shot by the end of the day," he said, and then, because it was 7 in the morning, "and the start of it too, if I'm honest. Read it out to me, would you? I'll tell you as we go." So Rowe read it out, 14 names, and Ev Sabine stood there with the bucket in his hand and went through them one at a time. Dead, moved away, that's her daughter's now, that one's the Grange and not the library at all, that one I'd take off because he sold the house in June. And he was right about every one of them, and it took 4 minutes, and Rowe folded the list back into his coat and thought nothing about it whatsoever. That night, Rowe stood at the top of the back stairs of the Aldrich Falls Free Library for a long time with the light on. 17 risers. A handrail that quit 18 inches short of the floor. A card taped to the beaded board that said, "Light on first," in a dead woman's handwriting. He knew 4 things, and not one of them fitted against any of the others. Somebody had stood where he was standing on the night of the 3rd of November, that somebody had gone through a drawer of paper front to back and left $340 in an open box at chest height. There were 9 people in this town with reason to be frightened of a filing cabinet, and he could not have one of their names. And a woman who had spent 22 years making certain nobody was ever seen going up these stairs had died, if she had been killed, and he did not yet know that she had, of the one thing her whole system was built to make impossible, which was being alone in that building with somebody. He put the light off from the top, because that is the only place it can be done from, and went down the 17 risers in the dark himself, to find out what it was like. It was very bad. Part 3. Meg Cyr drove up from Winslow on the Saturday morning and let Rowe into her mother's house on Chandler Street, and the house was exactly what he had expected, and slightly worse for it, a small 1930s cape with a porch on the wrong side, and inside it 31 years of one woman, half boxed and half not, the boxed half labelled in the same square hand as everything else she had ever touched. "I've done the bedroom and about a third of the front room," Meg said. "I keep getting into the photographs." "That's how it goes." Everybody says that. She said it without any edge on it. It's very annoying that it's true. He had told her on the phone what he wanted and why, and she had said yes before he finished the sentence, and now she stood in the kitchen doorway with her coat still on, and watched him look at her mother's kitchen and did not help, which he was grateful for. It was a kitchen from before. Formica, a wall phone with a cord, a calendar from the oil company. On the shelf over the stove, there was a row of things: a tin of loose tea, a jar of wooden spoons, a transistor radio with the aerial taped, and a recipe box. Rowe had gone in there for a Rolodex or an address book or a laptop, and there was no laptop, and he had been told there wouldn't be. He got to the recipe box last, because it was a recipe box. It was hard maple, about the size of a loaf tin, with a brass catch and a lid that had gone dark around the thumb. He opened it, and it was full to the top with 3x5 index cards, and the card at the front, in the big square hand, said, "Practice! Do not take out of this room." He stood there in a dead woman's kitchen with his hand still on the lid. "That's her recipes," Meg said. "That's her—" She came over. Rowe went through it with 2 fingers, the way you go through anything. 31 cards. Each one had a folder tab written out on the top line in full, and under it, in a smaller version of the same hand, a note. St. Onge Bequest, 2016. Restricted, books only, ask Alma before spending it. Newsletters. 91 to 99, Doris's. Do not throw out, Dee's daughter asks. Readers 4 to 6. Count these in June, they walk. And the cards were not in alphabetical order, they were in the order of the drawer. She indexed it, Rowe said. She indexed everything. Meg had her hand over her mouth. She had a card for the freezer. She had a card for which of the storm windows go on which side of the house. I threw out— She stopped. God, I nearly put that box in the bag on Tuesday. Rowe closed the lid and held it in both hands and looked at it. Miss Cyr, Meg, would you let me take this to the library for 2 hours? Take it wherever you want. He was at the door when she said from the kitchen in a different voice, Do you know he did the stone in 3 days? Rowe stopped. Ev Sabine, it's not a 3-day job, that. He'd have had to sit up nights with it, and he stood there and wouldn't take $1, and I couldn't make him, and it made me so angry, and I couldn't have told you why. She laughed at herself badly. Everybody's been kind. That's the thing nobody tells you. Everybody is so kind that you can't put your foot down anywhere. They did it on the Monday afternoon with the library shut, Rowe and Nadine, one on either side of the oak table, and it took 2 hours and 11 minutes. He read the cards out in order, and she found the folders in the drawer. He would say a tab, and she would put her fingers in and walk them forward and say yes, and put it on the table, and he would put the card face down on the stack, and they would go on. It was slow, dull, and completely absorbing, and by the 4th card they had stopped talking except for the words on the tabs. Practice. Yes. Mileage and misc. Yes. Hutchins Fund. Yes. St. Onge Bequest 2016. Nadine's fingers went forward and stopped and came back and went forward again. No. Rowe set that card face up, on its own, at the corner of the table. They went on. 12 more cards, 12 more yeses. Then, state reporting. Literacy. No! That one went face up next to the first. They were 3/4 of the way to the back of the drawer when Nadine, who had got quiet, said, Summer Food Program 2018, before he had read it out, and put both hands flat on the table, and said, It's not here either. And the last card in the box was Supplies, Standing Orders, and the last folder in the drawer was a wad of carbon paper old enough to vote, and behind the carbon paper there was nothing at all. 27 yeses. 4 cards face up at the corner of the table. St. Onge Bequest 2016. State Reporting, Literacy, Summer Food Program. 2018. Supplies, Standing Orders. Nadine looked at them for perhaps a second and a half. Then she said, Oh, they're all S. Rowe did not say anything. They're all S, she said again, and she was already up and moving because she was a librarian, and a librarian's whole nervous system is built for that particular click. So somebody was after a name. St. Onge. Alma St. Onge left us $11,000 for children's books in 2016, and there is a nephew in Norwich Walk who has been unhappy about it ever since, and I mean unhappy. He wrote to the trustees twice. Miss Pomelow. And Sanborn. We've got Sanborns all over the reporting because the Sanborn boy did the summer lunch delivery in 2018. That's the food program right there. That's 2 of them. Miss Pomelow, sit down a minute. She sat down. Rowe turned the 4 cards around so they faced her and put a finger on the 3rd one. Summer Food Program 2018. A federal lunch grant that ran one summer and closed out. Whose name is on that? The Sanborn boy delivered. Is his name on the folder? No. Is anybody's? It'd be the paperwork, the reimbursement forms, the meal counts, the state's sign-off. All right, he moved his finger. Supplies. Standing orders. Nadine opened her mouth and shut it. That's the paper order, she said. That's toner and copy paper and the janitorial supply from a company in Waterville. Is there a person in it? There's a rep. No. Not really. No. So what I've got, Rowe said, is a dead woman's bequest from 2016, a federal lunch program that folded in 2018, the state literacy returns, and the standing order for toner. He laid the cards out square. There is not one human being connecting those four things. There is not an address, or a dollar, or a date, or a family, or a grudge. I have gone at it from both ends, and there is nothing in the middle. And these four folders were not sitting together. St. Onge was fourth from the front. State reporting was in behind the readers. The lunch grant was 2/3 back. The supply order was the last thing in the drawer behind 1.5 feet of other paper. He let her get there. So he didn't grab a handful, Nadine said slowly. No. He went through the whole drawer, front to back, every folder in it, one at a time in the dark or near enough, and he pulled 4 of them out of 4 different places, and he put the rest back and shut it and locked it and hung the key up. Rowe put his hand flat over the 4 cards. And he didn't take 3 to bury the 4th either, which is what your chief thinks, and what I thought for 8 days. If you're hiding one folder, you take the ones on either side of it and you're gone in 9 seconds. You don't walk the length of a drawer in the dark, picking out the only 4 in it that start the same way. That's not camouflage. That's the opposite of camouflage. Nadine had gone very still on the other side of the table. Miss Pomerleau, what do those 4 tabs have in common? They start with an S. What else? Nadine looked at them for a long moment. Nothing, she said. Nothing at all. That's right. Rowe sat back. The first letter is the whole of it. He didn't get to St. Onge and he didn't get to supplies. He got to the shape of the first letter and stopped there because whatever else he could read, that was as far as he could trust himself to go quickly in somebody else's handwriting. He walked out to the bridge afterwards and stood in the cold, looking at the water, and reordered his entire case standing up. The question had been who wanted those 4 folders. There was no answer to that question, and there was never going to be one. The question was now something else. Somebody had come into that building with a key and gone through a drawer of paper looking for a thing with his own name on it. Rowe made himself say that part twice, because it was the part that carried the weight. Not a name. His name. A man who could read unfamiliar handwritten tabs at a glance would have taken one folder and been out the door in a minute. This man could not trust a word he had not already learned. He could trust one thing immediately. The first letter of the name his hand had been making on checks and receipts for 40 years. And he had stood in front of 31 hand-lettered tabs, in a room he had been coming to for years, under the pressure of being found there, and had not risked sounding out the words after that first letter. He had done what Gil Ouellette had described. Take everything that starts right and sort it out later, where nobody is watching you do it. 4 folders. Not 1. 4, because he could not tell them apart. Then the second thing arrived, and it was worse, and Rowe turned it over twice on the bridge before he would let himself have it. The learner files were in drawer 3, 9 of them tabbed with numbers, behind a separate lock, on a key that had been in Verna Cyr's cardigan pocket at the bottom of the stairs, and had gone to Augusta in a bag with $11 and a photograph of 2 children. He had never seen her open it. He had watched her work out of the top drawer every week of his life, and so when the moment came, the top drawer was the only drawer in the world. He had gone through the whole thing looking for himself, and come away with a bequest, a lunch grant, a state return, and an order for toner. He had known within a day or 2 that he had come away with nothing, and there was not one thing on this earth he could do about it. On the Tuesday morning, Rowe spent 2.5 hours on his knees on the back stairs of the Aldrich Falls Free Library, with a penknife, a hand lens, and a box of paper envelopes. There was nothing romantic about it. The stairs had been swept 4 or 5 times since the 3rd of November, and washed once, and walked on by the whole town in November mud. but a 1912 stair has rubber nosings tacked to the tread edges, and rubber nosings have a seam where they meet the wood, and a seam holds what a broom cannot get. He worked from the top down. First tread, nothing. Second, grit and a wood screw. Third, grit. Fourth tread from the top. Grit, and among the grit, in the lens, 3 or 4 particles that were not the grey-brown of a main road in November. They were pink, not brick pink, a hard, glassy pink with black in it. He got the same thing out of the nap of the carpet square in front of the file cabinet upstairs, and a little more from the sill of the back door. He labelled the envelopes and drove them to Augusta himself the next morning, rather than trust them to a courier, and the analyst who took them off him in the corridor looked in the first one, and looked up and said, "You know I'm going to tell you this is a rock." "I know." "You've got a cemetery in this town?" "I've got 2. "Then that's what I'm going to tell you," she said, not unkindly. "Give me 2 weeks." The hardest conversation of the case happened in a truck in the mill's lower lot at 3:30 on the Tuesday afternoon, in the 10 minutes between Gil Ouellette coming off shift and Gil Ouellette going home. Rowe had thought about how to do it for a day and a half, and had come round to the only version he could live with, which was to do it in daylight, to Gil's face, first. "I'm going to say a thing to you," he said, "and I'd rather you heard it from me than found out I'd been asking about you behind your back. Whoever went through that drawer couldn't read the tabs well enough to choose among them." Gil looked straight ahead through the windshield at the finishing shed. "Yeah," he said. "I know it." "You know it?" "I've known it since I stood in that room." Gil's hands were on his knees. "There's 4 folders gone out of a drawer and the money's still sitting there. I figured that out in the room, mister. I've had it in my chest ever since like I swallowed a stone. Where were you on the 3rd of November?" "Right here." Gil got a wallet out and got a folded paper out of the wallet, and it had been folded and unfolded a number of times. "That's my card. I was on 3 to 11 Friday, straight through Monday, no day off in it, on account of they were down a man on number 4, and I wanted the hours for Christmas. I got it out on the Friday. I've been carrying it since Friday." Rowe looked at it. "You've been carrying this since Friday, and you didn't hand it to me?" "I was waiting to see if you'd ask," Gil said, "because if you asked me, that meant you'd got there. And if you never asked me—" He stopped and started again. "There's 9 of us. If you never asked me, then you weren't going to get there at all, and she'd have died at the bottom of them stairs for nothing." Rowe put the time card on the dash between them. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't." Gil took the card back and folded it. "You had to. If I was you, I'd have been at me on the 2nd day." They sat. "Can I say the other part now?" Gil said. "Please. You keep saying 4 folders like it's 4. It ain't 4, it's 1. He turned in the seat. "You put me in that room in the dark, right? And there's 31 of them things in there, and every one of them's got a foot of handwriting on the top of it, and I've got to find mine. Now I can do S. I can do S all day. So I'm going along, and here's an S, and I take it, and I go on, and here's another S, and... Mister, what am I going to do? Put it back? I don't know. So I take that one too, and by the time I'm at the back of the drawer, I've got 4 of them under my arm, and I'm sweating through my coat, and I take 8, if I could carry 8, because you take everything that starts right, and you sort it out later where there's nobody watching you do it." He held up a finger. "That's the part," he said, "where there's nobody watching. That's the whole of it. You can't stand there and work it out. You'd sooner take the wrong 4 and get out the door." He looked down at his own hands. "And don't make too much out of a man being able to sign his name. Knowing your name with your hand ain't the same as knowing it with your eyes. I could sign mine 20 years before I could find it on a page somebody else wrote." Rowe sat with that. "Gil," he said, "how did she teach you?" "Same as everybody, I guess." "No, how, exactly?" "Words out of the mill," Gil said, as though it were obvious, and to him it was. "First night I ever went up there, she asked me what I did all day, and I told her, and she come back the next week with about 40 cards. Bearing, coupling, lockout, Dr. Blade. She wrote felt on one, and I laughed at her, and she said, 'No, you're kind of felt,' and made me tell her what a felt was on a paper machine for 20 minutes. He rubbed his jaw. "That's how she did it. She wouldn't teach a fella the cat sat on the mat. She'd say, "You already know 400 words, you just don't know you can see them." So she'd take your own words. She'd done that with everybody. She told me that. She said everybody comes in the door already carrying most of what they need. Somerset Adult and Community Education occupied the end of a wing of the old junior high in Skowhegan, and the woman who ran it was polite for 11 minutes and immovable for the whole of them. She could confirm that Aldrich Falls Free Library operated an independent adult basic literacy program with which her office had a memorandum of understanding, that the program reported an enrollment figure annually and had done for 22 years, and that the figure for the current year was 9. She could not confirm, and would not confirm, and did not in fact possess, a single name. "You don't have them," Rowe said. "We have never had them. That was the condition Verna set in 1997, and every director since has kept it, including 3 who thought it was a mistake." She had her hands folded on the desk. "Detective, I have been doing this work for 26 years. I want to tell you something, and I want you to hear it as information and not as an obstacle. Of the adults in this state who can't read a prescription label, do you know what the single most common reason is that they never walk in a door like mine?" "Tell me." "It isn't money, and it isn't transport, and it isn't time." She looked at him. "It's that somebody would find out. That's not a small fear that a good program can talk them out of. It's the whole of the thing. I have had men park behind this building and sit in the car for 40 minutes and drive home. Twice, 3 times, and then come. And if I get a warrant, then you'll get what I've got, which is a number 9 on a form." She let a beat go. "And you'll go and get the folders out of Verna's cabinet, which will take you a morning, and every one of those 9 people will read about it in the Somerset paper, and they will know that the reason Verna Cyr's system worked for 22 years is that she was alive to keep it. And then good luck to whoever tries to start that program up again in that town in my lifetime." Rowe went out to the car and sat in it in the school lot for a while, and then drove back up the river. 9 people. He could have all 9 names on a court order in about 72 hours, and it would cost him 9 people's lives to get the one he wanted, and 8 of those 9 had done nothing at all except be frightened of a thing that most of the world can do without thinking about it. On the Thursday, the foreman on number 4 asked Gil Ouellette why the state police had wanted a word with him, and did it in front of 2 other men, and it was not meant unkindly, which made it worse. Gil said it was about the library, and the foreman said, "What, that woman that fell?" And Gil said, "Yeah." And that was the whole conversation, and it went round the mill by the end of the shift the way a thing goes round a mill. There was a lead-hand slot coming open on number 4 in January. Gil had been told, unofficially twice, by 2 people who were in a position to know. It was $3 and change an hour, and it meant days. It also meant signing off the written lockout-tagout procedure at the start of every shift, not doing it, which he had done for 21 years, but reading it and putting his name at the bottom of it in front of the crew, and then reading out the day's job sheet to 4 men in a room. He had not told his wife about the lead-hand slot. He had told her about the library instead, 12 days ago, on the porch, in the dark, because of the drawer, and because he could not carry both, and she had taken it exactly as badly and exactly as well as Nadine had, and had then said, 20 years, Gil, and gone inside and shut the door, and come back out 10 minutes later with 2 coffees and sat down beside him, and that was the whole of it, and it was enough. The lead-hand slot he had not told her about. It got out the way everything gets out in a town of 2,900 people, which is honestly, by accident, and through nobody's fault at all. Nadine Pomerleau had to tell the chair of the trustees why a state police detective had taken the September minutes, spent 2 hours in the tutoring room with the drawer open, and asked for the memorandum of understanding with Skowhegan. She told him the truth because he was the chair and because she is a straight woman, and the truth included the names of 4 folders. The chair of the trustees is a retired agricultural agent of 76 who has never in his life repeated a thing maliciously. He told his wife over supper because it was an odd little puzzle, and it had bothered him all afternoon. 4 folders, and every one of them starts with an S. Now what do you make of that? His wife works the breakfast counter at the Falls Diner on Bridge Street. By 11 o'clock on Thursday morning it had been said out loud at that counter, by somebody who worked it out in about 4 seconds, that whoever went into the library never took the money, because whoever went into the library couldn't read what he was taking. And Aldrich Falls did not find that hard to believe, and that was the terrible part. Everybody at that counter could think of somebody. An uncle who got his boy to fill out the tax forms. A father-in-law who has ordered the same thing at that very counter for 19 years. A man on their own crew who always has to go out to the truck for his glasses. 2 of them said a name out loud before the coffee came round. The names were wrong, and it did not matter, because by supper time there were 4 or 5 names loose in that town, and every one of them belonged to somebody who had done nothing. Wade Vachon ate at that counter on Thursday evening. Wade Vachon walked into the Aldrich Falls town office at 9:20 on the morning of Friday the 6th of December, went past the tax collector's window, knocked on the frame of Bernie Fortin's open door, and said that he had gone into the library on the night of the 3rd of November and gone through the drawer upstairs and taken 4 folders out of it, and that Verna Cyr had come out onto the landing and seen him, and that he had put a hand on her. Part 4. The statement ran to a page and 3/4 in Bernie Fortin's handwriting with Wade Vachon's initials at the foot of every paragraph and his signature at the bottom, and Rowe read it 4 times in the town office on the Friday afternoon with the scanner muttering on the shelf, and then read it a 5th time with a pen, marking as he went. I went in the back door about 8 o'clock, it was open, I went up the back stairs, I went in the room where the file cabinet is, and I opened the top drawer and I went through it and I took 4 folders out of it. I did not take the money. She came out onto the landing and she seen me and I put a hand on her and she went down the stairs. I went down and she was dead. I went out the back and I burned the folders in the barrel behind my place. I have not told anybody about this until today. Rowe put the pen down. "Bernie," he said, "show me one thing in this that isn't already in the diner." Fortin, who had been waiting for that, had her arms folded and did not answer. The back door was open. Everybody knows that door's been open since the Eisenhower administration. He went in the top drawer. That's been up and down Bridge Street for 3 weeks. He took 4 folders. That's been on the counter at the Falls since yesterday morning, along with the letter they all start with. He didn't take the money, which is the headline. There's a woman in this town who has told me twice, unprompted, that the money's still there. Rowe turned the page round. He put a hand on her and she went down the stairs, which is the only way anybody in Aldrich Falls has been able to picture it since the 21st, when your medical examiner changed 1 word on a form. He put his finger on the first line of it. And then there's this. I went in the back door about 8 o'clock. Bernie, that man sat in his own kitchen on the 25th of November with no lawyer and nothing to gain, and told me 6:40, 7:15, and he told it to me straight after he'd been caught lying about being there at all, which is when a man's times are worth something because he's stopped choosing them. Now he's moved himself 1 hour and 20 minutes. In the wrong direction. Onto her. He sat back. Nobody gets their own evening wrong by 80 minutes. They get it wrong when they're building it to fit somebody else's. "He came in on his own 2 feet, Fortin said. "Nobody went and got him. Nobody sat him down. He knocked on my door frame at 9:20 in the morning and he was stone sober and he read it back and he initialed every paragraph. I know it. And I never fed him a line of it. I know that too." Rowe looked up. "Bernie, I'm not saying you did. That's the whole difficulty. He didn't need you to. This town fed him the entire statement over a plate of eggs." Fortin sat down on the edge of the desk. "Then find me one thing in it that's wrong," she said. "Because right now I've got a man with a burglary conviction, in that building at 7:15. No alibi after that. A public row with the deceased 10 weeks back, and his own hand at the bottom of the page. Nathan, I have to take that seriously. I'd have to take it seriously if I liked him. And I do like him." Assistant District Attorney Priya Anand drove up to Skowhegan from Augusta on the Monday and put the file on the table in an interview room in the county building and did Rowe the courtesy of hearing the whole of it before she said anything. Then she said, "You've got a hypothesis and I've got a signed confession." "I know what I've got." "Do you know what a defense lawyer would do to your hypothesis? He'd stand up and say that 4 folders beginning with S is a coincidence. and that my alternative theory of the case is a man who can't read, whose name I don't have, whose existence I can't prove, from a list that doesn't exist." She turned a page without looking at it. "And he'd be within his rights, and the judge would let him. The 4 weren't together in the drawer. That's your best piece, and I'll grant you it's a good one." She looked up. "It is not as good as a signature." Rowe said, "What are you charging?" "Manslaughter, burglary. He'll get court-appointed out of Skowhegan by Wednesday." Annan put her pen down. "And here's the part I want you to hear from me and not from the docket. He's told the chief twice that he doesn't want a trial. If he waives indictment and proceeds by information, and if his lawyer can't talk him out of it, and I have no reason yet to think he can, then he can be in front of a superior court justice, entering a plea inside a fortnight." "A fortnight?" "The 19th, Annan said. 2 Thursdays. That's not me being quick, detective. That's a man being quick, and there is nothing in the law of this state that requires me to save a competent adult from telling the truth about himself." Rowe looked at the window and the grey river beyond it. "And if he isn't telling the truth about himself?" "Then you have 12 days, she said, "and I will keep every one of them open for you, and I will not lie to you about how it looks." They gave Rowe 20 minutes with Wade Vachon on the Tuesday at the Somerset County Jail out at East Madison, with his lawyer present and objecting in a mild professional way that Wade waved off. Wade looked better than he had on Water Street. That was the thing that got at Rowe afterwards, in the car. He looked like a man who had put something down. "You've made a mistake," Rowe said. "I've made about 900 of them." "You know what I mean." "I know what you mean, and I signed it," Wade said. "That's it. That's the whole of what I've got for you." Rowe leaned back and let a good half-minute go past. "The folders," he said. "What did you do with them?" "Burned them." "Where?" "Barrel out back of my place." "When?" "That night." "What was in them?" "I never looked." 4 folders and you never looked?" "I was in a state," Wade said. "How'd you get in the cabinet?" "It was open. It was locked when Miss Pomelow opened it 11 days later with a key off a hook in a desk." Wade did not move at all. "Then I locked it," he said. "With what?" "With the key off the hook in the desk." "How'd you know the key was on a hook in the desk?" "Everybody knows that," Wade said. And he was right. Nadine had said the same sentence in this same flat tone to Bernie Fortin on the 15th of November, anybody who ever watched her work in that room, and it had gone into a report, and out of the report, and around a town. Rowe stood up. "Mr. Vachon," he said, "somebody told you something. Or you saw something, or you worked something out, and you've decided it's worth 6 years of your life, which is roughly what my colleague is going to want, and which at 46 is not a thing you get back." Wade looked at the table. "I've done 4, he said. "It's not the end of the world. That's the thing nobody believes about it. It's not the end of the world." Rowe drove out to Water Street on the way back and stood behind the two family with his hands in his pockets and looked at a rusted 55-gallon drum with 3/4 of an inch of black rainwater in the bottom of it and a raft of maple leaves floating on top, rotted down to their veins, and a rim gone orange all the way round. He put a stick in it and stirred. Under the leaves there was more leaf, and under that, silt. He photographed it from 4 angles and got the fire chief out on the Wednesday morning to look at it, and the fire chief, who was also the plumbing inspector and also somebody's brother-in-law, stood over it for about 8 seconds and said that barrel hadn't had a fire in it since the summer, and if Rowe wanted it in writing he'd want a day, and Rowe said he wanted it in writing. The walk-through happened on the Wednesday afternoon at the library, with Wade's lawyer present and unhappy, on the record, at Wade's own insistence. The lawyer's position, stated twice for the recording, was that his client had already given a statement and had nothing to gain. Wade's position, stated once, was that he would rather do it than sit in East Madison thinking about it. The lawyer looked at Rowe with an expression that had a good deal in it, and Rowe looked back with nothing in his at all, and they went in the front door because there were 3 of them, and it was raining. "Take me through it," Rowe said. Wade did. He came in the back, they went out and came back in the back, and he went up the stairs, and he was fine on the stairs. He was fine in the tutoring room. He stood at the drawer and put his hand on it and pulled it out to the stop and said, "I went through it and let it go." "And she came out onto the landing?" "She come out and she seen me." "From where?" Wade turned and looked at the doorway and then past it. And there was nothing past it but a landing the size of a card table and the head of the stairs. And Rowe watched him understand that there was nowhere for her to have come from, because the tutoring room is the only room at the top of those stairs, and the only way onto that landing is out of the room he was standing in or up from the bottom. "Out of here," Wade said. "She was in here with you." "Yeah." "And you went through the whole drawer with her in here?" Wade's mouth went hard. "It was quick." "All right," Rowe said, and let it go because he did not want the argument. He wanted the stairs. "Show me how you left." They went out onto the landing and Wade started down. Rowe stayed at the top. Wade went down 17 risers with his hand riding the rail on the left, and at the bottom the rail quit 18 inches short, the way it has since the 50s, and he stepped off into the rear hall and turned and reached out, without looking, the way a man reaches for a switch, and put his hand flat on the beaded board at shoulder height beside the stair mouth. There was nothing under his hand. He kept it there a moment. Then he moved it 8 inches to the left and put it flat again, on plaster. Then he took it off the wall and stood in a dark hall in a wet coat, with the rain going on the door behind him. "There's no switch down there, Mr. Vachon," Rowe said from the top. "There never has been. There's one switch, and it's up here by my head. And whoever put that light out on the 3rd of November was standing exactly where I'm standing now, after Verna Cyr was already at the bottom of these stairs." Wade said to the floor, "Then I put it out at the top and I went down after. In the dark. In the dark. Down 17 boxed-in risers in a strange building with no light, at speed, with 4 folders under your arm, when you'd already looked at what's at the bottom of them." Wade Vachon stood in the rear hall of the Aldrich Falls Free Library for a long time. Then he said, "I'm not going to say another word," and he did not, then or afterwards, and he said it standing up without heat, the way he had said everything else since the 6th of December. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder and took him out to the car. At the door, Wade stopped and half-turned and said one more thing, which Rowe wrote down verbatim in the car with the engine off. "You ought to leave it. It don't do anybody any good now, and it's going to do somebody a lot of harm." Priya Anand did not fold, and Rowe had not expected her to, and afterwards he thought better of her for it. What she did was worse and more useful. On the Thursday morning she stood up in chambers in Skowhegan in front of a Superior Court Justice with the Director of Somerset Adult and Community Education sitting 8 feet away with her own counsel. And she said that the state was in the position of holding a confession it had a professional obligation to test, that the only means of testing it lay in 9 files in a locked drawer, and that she was asking for them knowing exactly what she was asking for. The director spoke for 11 minutes without a note. She talked about men parking behind a building and sitting in the car for 40 minutes and driving home. She said the number 26 years. She said that in her professional opinion, the order the state was seeking would end adult literacy provision in the town of Aldrich Falls for a generation, and that she was not saying that for effect, and that she would put it in an affidavit. The justice listened to the whole of it, and then granted the warrant with conditions that took him 10 minutes to dictate, and that Rowe kept a copy of in his coat for the rest of his working life. The 9 files were to be removed from the drawer by Rowe alone, in the presence of the library director, and inventoried by number only. They were to be read by Rowe alone. They were not to be copied, photographed, digitized, or removed from the county. No name found in them was to be disclosed to any person, including the district attorney's office, unless and until it became the subject of a charging decision. They were to be returned to the drawer within 72 hours. Rowe was to file a personal affidavit as to compliance. And one more clause, which the justice added at the end after a pause, looking at nobody. Any material in those files relating to a person against whom no charge was brought was to be treated by the state as though it had never been read. "That last one isn't enforceable," Priya Anand said in the corridor afterwards. "No," Rowe said. "You understand it isn't." "I understand it isn't," Rowe said, "and I intend to obey it anyway." He took the 9 folders out of drawer 3 at 4 o'clock on the Thursday afternoon, with Nadine Pomerleau standing at his elbow, and he signed for them, and she countersigned, and neither of them said anything while it was being done. He read them in a room at a motel on the Madison Road between 5 in the evening and 10 past 2 in the morning, with the television off and the curtain shut, and it was one of the worst nights of his working life. They were beautiful, is the thing. That was what he had not braced for. Verna Cyr had been a superb teacher, and it was all in there. Years of somebody's careful, patient, entirely unwitnessed work. Assessments and word lists and reading logs, and in the back of every folder a stapled sheaf of the learner's own writing, in order, going from block capitals to something you could read. R1 was a woman who had been renewing a driver's license for 11 years by memorizing the eye chart and the manual and getting her daughter to fill in the form, and who had come to Verna in 2019 after she nearly went the wrong way up an exit ramp outside Waterville. R2 was 26 and had finished high school in this state. R6 was a man with a granddaughter in the 3rd grade and a note in Verna's hand, dated last February, that said he brought her report card in. He asked me to read it to him, and then he asked me to read it again. 16 months. Rowe read all 9. He had thought about reading 4 and stopping. He read all 9 because he did not know which one he wanted, and because stopping would have meant deciding on the basis of nothing which of these people deserved to keep the inside of their life, and he did not think he had the standing to make that decision at 1 in the morning in a motel room. R4 was the thickest folder in the drawer. It went back 3.5 years, and it had more in it than any 2 of the others together. The intake sheet was filled out in Verna's hand, and not the learner's, which was true of 6 of the 9. Age, at intake, 55. Occupation, stone. Under scheduling preference, in her writing, in quotation marks, because she had plainly written down exactly what he said. After dark, and not a night the mill lets out. Under it, in a different pen, added later, Sundays, 6:30. He asks that I do not put a light on in the front of the building, and 40 pages in, on ruled paper, in a hand that Rowe looked at for a long time before he understood what he was looking at, a hand that was not shaky, not childish, not clumsy, but slow. Every letter separate, every letter the same height, the pen lifted and set down between one letter and the next, the way a man lays out a line of type or sets a row of brick. The whole thing done with enormous care by somebody whose hands were not the problem. Granite, Polish, bevel, base, rose. In loving memory, and under that, on the back of the sheet, in Verna Cyr's big square hand, the sentence she had given him to go with it. The rose on the corner of the stone is the same rose he cut for his mother in 1979. There were later pages. On an October reading log, Verna had written, "Familiar shop words are quick now. New words still stop him cold. He will work them out if he has time, but he guesses when he thinks somebody is waiting. Do not let him guess." The last dated note in the folder was from Sunday, the 3rd of November. Told him after the lesson that the Augusta nomination went in Friday. He said I had no right. I said I had asked twice. He left early. I may have mistaken silence for permission. Rowe read that note 3 times. This was not a man who could not read at all. That would have been simpler. He could read things he had learned, slowly and carefully, and he could work a new word out if nobody was watching the clock. What he could not do was trust an unfamiliar handwritten label at speed. Under fear, the first letter could be the only part of a word he was certain of. Rowe went back through the whole folder afterwards, page by page, 41 months of it, looking for one thing. She had never once written the man's name. Not on the intake sheet, not on an assessment, not on a reading log, not in a margin, not in a note to herself at 1 in the morning. 3.5 years, 400 sheets of paper, and in the place where a name would go she had put a dash. Rowe sat on the end of the bed at 2 in the morning and heard Gil Ouellette in the cab of a truck in the lower lot at the mill. She'd take your own words. She'd done that with everybody. There was nothing in R4 that was a name. There was nothing in R4 that was an address or a telephone number or a date of birth, because Verna Cyr had never written any of it down anywhere. What was in R4 was a man who had turned up in a September 3 years and some months back at the age of 55, who worked stone, who could come only after dark and never on a night the mill let out, who had asked that the front of the building be kept unlit, who came on Sunday evenings at 6:30, who had a mother and had cut her a rose in 1979, and who, on the night Verna died, had learned that she had mailed his nomination to Augusta without receiving a yes from him. He was in the car at 7:30 on the Friday morning. Riverside Cemetery had a sexton, and Rowe had him by 8, and he was 71 and had done the job since 1996, and stood in the shed doorway with the Somerset paper folded under his arm at the crossword, and he read the whole of Rowe's card out loud at arm's length without being asked, including the fax number, and talked for 10 minutes about the frost heave in the old section, and was on the 4th of July committee, and was not the man. The quarry was 40 minutes north above Bingham, and had 11 employees, and cut nothing but curbing and rough block, and did not letter, had never lettered, and had had a manager for 6 years who let Rowe walk the yard and go through the payroll, and who was helpful in the way people are when they have absolutely nothing to hide and are enjoying themselves. And in the town of Aldrich Falls, Somerset County, Maine, population 2,911, there was one shop that cut and lettered stone, and there had been for 3 generations, and it was on the Anson Road. Rowe drove out and parked across from the gate at 4:10 in the afternoon with the light already going, and did not get out. The lights were on in the long shop. The flatbed with the boom on it was in the yard with its outriggers down. He could see a shape moving behind the frosted panel at the near end, back and forth along the bench, unhurried, the way a man moves when he has done a thing 10,000 times. Rowe sat there for 40 minutes, and then started the car and drove back into town without going in, because he wanted to be right before he let himself be certain, and because there was one envelope in Augusta he had not had back yet, and one typed list of 11 vehicles in a folder on the seat beside him that he had read once, 3 weeks ago, and had not thought about since. Part 5. The lab called on the Monday morning, the 16th of December. "It's a rock," the analyst said. "You told me that in the corridor." "I'm telling you again because I want it on the front of the conversation." He could hear her turning pages. "All right. Your 4 envelopes, the tread seam, the carpet nap, and the door sill all have the same population in them, and it's a coarse crushed granite with a pink potassium feldspar in it, orthoclase, a smoky quartz, and a black mica. Grain's big. It's not a roadstone and it's not a brick. In this state, that combination reads as a Deer Isle-type granite, which is what half the monuments and about 1/3 of the public buildings in Maine are made of, and which has been quarried and shipped and recut and reset in every town in it since about 1870. How hard can you put it?" "I can put it as consistent with, and I would fight you in a corridor before I put it any harder than that," she said. "I can tell you the material didn't come off the stairs themselves, because the stairs are fir. I can tell you it's fresh. The fracture faces are sharp. It hasn't been rolling around in a hallway for 10 years. That's real, and I'll say it in court." A pause. "And then a defense attorney will ask me whether that material could have been carried into that building on the boots of any person who had walked through a cemetery, stood on a monument yard, sat on a granite doorstep, or helped a neighbor set a post. And I will have to say yes, and he will sit down because that's all he needs. So it's a direction." "It's a direction," she agreed. "It's a good one. It's not evidence, and I'd be obliged if nobody put it in front of a grand jury pretending it was. Priya Anand did not put it in front of anybody. It never went into a charging document, it was never argued, and it did not appear in the eventual plea at all. It had already done the only work it was ever going to do, which was to get a tired man on his knees on a staircase in the first week of December, and to keep the word stone in his head afterwards." Rowe went out to Riverside Cemetery at 8:30 that morning, and walked the old section with his collar up. The Sabines were in the 4th row from the wall, 3 generations of them under grey granite that had been cut in their own shop, and the 4th stone along was a small one, and it said Sabine, and under it Claire M., and 1921 to 1979. There was a rose cut on the bottom right corner of it, about the size of a child's palm, and it was hand-cut and not blasted, and Rowe, who did not know one thing about the trade, could see even in flat December light that it had been done by somebody who was not very good yet, and who had wanted very badly to do it well. He stood there in the wet grass for a while. Then he went back to the car and got the typed list out of the folder on the passenger seat and read it for the second time in his life. 7:52. Flatbed with boom, dark color, westbound. 8:41. Flatbed with boom, dark color, eastbound. Same vehicle as 7:52. 49 minutes. Then he did the thing he should have done in November, which was ask for the rest of it. The window on that list was 7:30 to 9 o'clock, because 7:30 to 9 o'clock was where the medical examiner had put the death, and a tired officer had been given a window and had done exactly what he was asked. Rowe called the mill and had the whole of Sunday evening pulled, 6 o'clock to midnight, and it came back inside 2 hours because the file was still on the drive. There were 4 crossings, not 2. 6:11. Flatbed with boom, dark color, westbound. 7:19. Flatbed with boom, dark color, eastbound. 7:52. Flatbed with boom, dark color, westbound. 8:41. Flatbed with boom, dark color, eastbound. In at 6:10. Out at 7:20, and then back in again at 7:50. That was the one that stopped him, and he sat in the car outside the cemetery with the list on the wheel for a while. R4 had supplied the missing fact. At the first visit, during the ordinary lesson, Verna had told the man she had mailed the nomination on Friday. He had objected and left early. The truck had then crossed back out of town at 7:19. 33 minutes later it came in again. Whatever had happened at the top of those stairs on the 3rd of November, it had not happened on the way home from anything. Somebody had gone home with a piece of information in his head, sat with it long enough for it to become unbearable, and turned round. He called Bernie Fortin and asked her how many flatbeds with a boom on them there were in the town of Aldrich Falls, and she said 1, and then said, "Nathan," in a voice she had not used with him before. "How many people drive it?" 1. He's driven that truck to church for 20 years. He drove his wife's flowers to the church in it because he wouldn't have anybody else touch them. Fortin stopped. "Nathan, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Bernie, where does he park when he does the boiler?" "The lot out back." "Where does he park on a Sunday evening?" There was a long pause on the line, and in it Rowe could hear the scanner going in the town office, and then Bernie Fortin said, in a voice gone completely flat, "There's a truck sits down at the town landing some Sunday nights. Been sitting down there for years. My nightman's run the plate twice for practice." She breathed out. "It's 200 yards. You'd walk up the path along the bank and come out at the back of the library and not pass one lit window in this whole town." He went out to the shop on the Tuesday afternoon, alone, in his own car, and asked Bernie Fortin to sit in a cruiser at the gate and stay in it. Ev Sabine was at the bench with the sandblast cabinet running, and he shut it off when he saw Rowe come in and wiped his hands and did not look surprised, and that was the first thing. "Mr. Sabine, you're not under arrest and I haven't got a warrant. You can tell me to go and I'll go, and the door's behind me the whole time. I know how it works. Do you want to sit down?" "I'd sooner stand," Ev said, "if it's all the same," and put both hands on the edge of the bench, and stood. Rowe took his time and did it in order, and did not raise his voice once. He said that on the night of the 3rd of November, somebody had gone through the top drawer of the file cabinet in the tutoring room of the Aldrich Falls Free Library, front to back, and had taken 4 folders out of 4 different places in it, and that those 4 folders had exactly one thing in common in the whole world. He said that whoever had done that had walked past $340 in an open box at the height of his own chest. He said that the light on that stairwell has one switch, and it is at the top, and that it was off. He said that at the bottom of the case there was a woman who had spent 22 years making certain that nobody in this town was ever seen going up a set of back stairs, and that she had kept 9 names in her own head for the whole of it, and had never once written them down. He said that he had read the file of a man who had come in at the age of 55 in a September 3 years and some months back, whose trade was stone, who asked to come after dark, and never on a night the mill let out, who asked that the light at the front of the building be left off, who came on Sunday evenings at 6:30, and who had cut a rose on his mother's stone in 1979. The last note in that file said that on the 3rd of November, Verna Cyr told him she had mailed an award nomination to Augusta 2 days earlier. It said he told her she had no right and left the lesson early. He said that a flatbed truck with a boom on it had crossed the Bridge Street span 4 times on that same evening, in at 6:10, out at 7:20, in again at 7:50, and out at 7:20, and that there was one truck of that description in this town, and that it was standing in the yard behind them with its outriggers down. The first pair of crossings was the lesson. The second pair was a return trip made after the man had gone home, knowing his name had been sent somewhere he had never agreed to send it. Ev Sabine stood at his bench and listened to the whole of it without moving. "Mr. Sabine," Rowe said, "I don't think you went there to hurt her. I've never once thought that." Ev's hands were flat on the wood. "It was in the drawer under the numbers," he said. "I never knew there was a drawer under the numbers. 3.5 years I sat in that room and I never once saw her open it." He said it to the bench, not to Rowe, and it was the first true thing anybody in Aldrich Falls had said out loud about the 3rd of November, and it came out of him the way a splinter comes out. Rowe did not fill the space. After a while, Ev said, "I caught her sleeve. That's the whole of it, mister. I put my hand out, and I got hold of her sleeve at the top there, and she pulled back off me, 1 step, and she'd got that box in both her arms." He turned his hands over and looked at them. "She never made a sound going down. I want somebody to know that. People keep—" He stopped. "She never made a sound." "And then you went back up." "And then I went back up." "At your lesson that evening she told you she had mailed the nomination," Rowe said. "You went home. Then you came back." Ev looked at the window for a long moment, at the yard, and the rows of blank stones going blue in the dusk. "I sat at the kitchen table," he said. "There was an electric bill there. I read enough of it to know what it was, and not enough to know what they wanted, and all I could think was that my name was in Augusta because she was pleased with me." He swallowed. "I went back to tell her to get it back. Then I thought there'd be a copy. Something with my name on it. I thought it would be in the drawer I watched her use every Sunday." He put a hand flat on the bench. "She could have told you the rest better than I ever could. That's the whole of what's wrong with me, mister. It took me 59 years to find out it was a thing you could go and get help for. Mr. Sabine, before you say anything else, I'm going to read you something, and then I'm going to ask you whether you want a lawyer here, and if you say yes, we stop, right there, and I'll not ask you another question." Rowe read him his rights off the card, out loud, and then read them a second time, because Ev asked him to. "Do you understand them?" "Yes." "Do you want a lawyer?" Ev Sabine looked around his own shop. The bench, the racks of stencil, the cold fluorescent, the yard through the window with 50 blank stones standing in rows in the dusk. "I'll have one," he said. "I've not talked for 44 years. I'm about done with doing it wrong." Rowe made the call. The duty attorney out of Skowhegan said he could be there inside the hour. Rowe wrote down the time, put the card and his notebook away, and said, "Then we wait." They waited 12 minutes without speaking. The sandblast cabinet ticked as it cooled. Then Ev said of his own accord, "The folders are still here." Rowe did not ask where. "Don't move anything until your lawyer gets here," he said. The lawyer arrived 40 minutes later in a wet overcoat, spoke with Ev alone in the office at the back of the shop, and came out 23 minutes after that with his legal pad under one arm. "Mr. Sabine wants to surrender 4 library folders," he said. "He is not answering further questions today. You can receive the property in my presence." Ev went along the bench to the flat file at the end where the stencil layouts lived and pulled the second drawer out, the wide, shallow one. Under a roll of stencil, a steel rule, and a sheet of brown paper, lying flat and square to the corners of the drawer, the way everything in that shop was square to something, were 4 manila folders. He carried them back and set them down on the bench, and squared them with 2 fingers because he could not help it, and stood away from them. By Tuesday I knew none of them was my lesson work, he said. His lawyer looked at him but did not interrupt. I knew that much by the paper, but I couldn't read what I'd taken. I couldn't burn 4 things out of her cabinet not knowing what they were, so I put them there. Rowe looked at the 4 tabs. St. Onge Bequest, 2016. State Reporting, Literacy. Summer Food Program. 2018. Supplies, Standing Orders. Ev looked at his lawyer. Can he tell me what they say? The lawyer considered it, then nodded once. The tabs only, no questions. So Rowe read him the 4 tabs, standing in a monument shop on the Anson Road at 5:20 in the afternoon on the 17th of December. Ev said nothing after that, and Rowe asked nothing. The property was bagged, receipted, and carried out past 50 blank stones, standing in rows in the dusk. The court order out of Augusta came back in the first week of January, and what came with it was 3 sheets of ruled paper in a woman's big square hand. The Maine Adult Education Association had it on file in a folder in Augusta because it had been mailed to them on the 1st of November, and it was the only copy that had ever existed because the form said, "Return this page," and Verna Cyr did what forms told her. It was a nomination for Adult Learner of the Year. It ran to about 600 words. It did not use the man's name until the last line, because the first 2 pages were taken up with what she wanted them to understand before they knew who she was talking about. It said that he had come to her in September 3 years ago, 14 months after his wife died, because his wife had read the world to him for 31 years, and there was nobody left in the house to read the electric bill. It said that he had a shop and a payroll and a business his grandfather started, and that he had run all of it for 4 decades on his memory, his numbers, and other people's voices, and that he was the most careful man she had ever taught. It said that in the first year he would not write anything down in front of her, and that in the second year he wrote her a note and left it under the door and never mentioned it, and that in the 3rd year he read 4 paragraphs from a book about the Deer Isle quarries that they had worked over for 3 Thursdays, all the way through without asking her for a word, and that when he had finished he sat there for a while and then said, "I'd have liked my mother to hear that," and that it had taken her the rest of the evening to drive home. It said in the last paragraph that she had asked him twice for permission, and he had not said yes, and he had not said no, and that she had decided his silence was fear rather than refusal. It said she was going to send it anyway, and that she knew she might be wrong to do it. It said his name in the last line. Meg Cyr read it in Rowe's car outside the library with the engine running and the heater on. And Rowe looked out the windshield the whole time and afterwards could not have told anybody what her face did. What she said when she gave it back was, "That's the stupidest thing she ever did in her life." And then, after a while, she was so pleased with herself. I can see her at the post office. The charge against Wade Vachon was dismissed on the 20th of December, the day after he had been due to enter a plea. He went to see Ev Sabine at East Madison on the 28th, and Rowe was in the building on other business and stood in the corridor outside the visiting room and did not go in and did not need to, because Wade told him afterwards in the parking lot in the cold with his hands in his pockets. 2013, he said. My mother was in Skowhegan, and it was the last week, and there was a paper they wanted signed, and I couldn't get there till the evening, and Ev drove up with me. And they give him the form to hold, and he had it in his hands about 10 minutes. Wade looked at the fence. And then he says to me, "Wade, I can't read this." Just like that, sitting in a plastic chair with the vending machine going, first and last time in 59 years he ever said it to a living soul that wasn't Louise and wasn't that woman in the library. And you never told anybody? Of course I never told anybody. He phoned you, Rose said. The Monday morning. Wade nodded slowly. 10 of 6. Wanted to know what time I was at the library and had I gone up them stairs. He rubbed his face with both hands. And I said no, and I never thought about it again till the 21st when they changed the paper on her, and then I thought about it about 900 times. You could have told me in November. Yeah, Wade said. Why didn't you? Wade Vachon thought about it for a while, and gave an answer that Rowe carried around for a long time afterwards. Because he gave me a job in 2009, he said. and there wasn't a man in this county would put me on a payroll, and he never once asked me what I'd done. He never asked me. 2 years, and he never asked me." He shrugged. "And I figured, well, I've done 4 before. I know how it goes in there. I know how to be in there." He looked up. He wouldn't have known how to be in there. He'd have had to ask somebody to read him the mail. Everett Sabine pleaded on the 4th of March in Somerset County Superior Court in Skowhegan. Manslaughter, Class A, burglary, Class B, tampering with physical evidence, 12 years, all but 6 suspended, 4 years probation on release, restitution to the town of Aldrich Falls for the cabinet lock and the reconstruction of the records, and a condition, put in at the request of the family and not of the state, that he initiate no contact of any kind with the Cyr family, and that any contact be at their asking and not his. Priya Anand said afterwards that she had asked for 8 and had been talked to 6 by a judge who had read the nomination letter, and that she was not going to pretend she had fought very hard about it. Wade Vachon was charged with hindering apprehension and with making a false statement to a law enforcement officer. On the state's own motion, it went to a deferred disposition, 18 months, 100 hours of community service, and dismissal to a civil violation on completion. Anand put her reasons on the record at some length, and they were not comfortable ones. She said that a false confession is not a victimless act, that it had consumed 9 days of an investigation, and put an innocent man in a county jail cell, that innocent man being the defendant himself, and that she was exercising discretion in this case for reasons that she wished to be understood as reasons and not as sympathy. Then she said, for the record, that she would like the court to note that the defendant had told the truth from the moment somebody had physically demonstrated to him that he could not have done what he said he had done, and that this was, in her experience, unusual. Wade did his 100 hours at Riverside Cemetery on the mowing for the sexton with the crossword. The program did not close. It came within about 6 weeks of it. 2 of the 9 stopped coming in January, and one of those 2 came back in February. Somerset Adult and Community Education sent a tutor up from Skowhegan on Thursdays and Sundays, a woman in her 50s who had done the work for a long time, and the first thing she did when she got into that room was to look at the card taped above the light switch and leave it exactly where it was. The trustees voted in January to keep the program in Aldrich Falls. It was 6-1. Nadine Pomerleau moved it herself. In February, the library put up a small brass plate in the tutoring room, and the wording took the trustees 2 meetings, and it ended up being 9 words long, and it did not have Verna Cyr's name on it, because Nadine argued that Verna would have taken one look at that and gone up the wall. What it said was, "This room is private. Please knock and wait." Gil Ouellette got the lead hand slot on number 4 in March. He told them, first. That was his own idea, and nobody advised it. He sat down with the shift super and the safety man in the office off the machine floor and told them that he read slow, that he had been getting help with it for 2.5 years, that he could do the job and he could do the paperwork, but he was going to want the job sheet in his hand 10 minutes before the crew came in and not 30 seconds before, and that if that was a problem, he'd rather know now than in April. The safety man said that half the crew wanted the job sheet 10 minutes early, and none of the rest of them had ever had the nerve to ask for it. The last week of April is when the Kennebec Valley finally gives it up. The snow goes off the north sides, the roads come apart and get patched, and everything smells of mud and diesel and, faintly for about 10 days, of the mill. Meg Cyr came up on a Saturday and went out to Riverside with a trowel and a bag of bulbs that were 3 months late going in, and stood in front of her mother's stone for a while. It was the pink granite, polished front face, rough sides, 36 inches across the top, CYR, Verna Louise, the dates, and under the dates the 4 words she had written on the back of an order of service on a Wednesday in November and could not afterwards remember writing. She had thought about it, on and off, for 4 months. Nadine had asked her once, carefully, whether she wanted the town to see about a different stone, and had made it clear that the money would be found and that nobody would ever mention it again. "No," Meg said on the phone, in January, and then again in March, and then in person in April to the sexton, who had also asked, because everybody asked. "It's my handwriting," she said. "That's my hand on the front of it." He didn't put one thing of his own on that stone, and I know for a fact he checked it 4 times. She put the trowel down and sat back on her heels. He can do his 6 years. He's not having this off me as well. On the first Thursday in May, the tutoring room of the Aldrich Falls Free Library was warm enough to have the window open, and the radiator had stopped knocking because somebody had come in on a Saturday in April and bled the second-floor loop. Gil Ouellette came up the back stairs at 10 to 6 the way he had come up them for 2.5 years, sideways because he was a big man and it was a narrow stair. He put the light on at the top. He got his cards out of the drawer, and the drawer did not shut easy. It had not shut easy since the 3rd week of March, when 4 folders had come back to the Aldrich Falls Free Library from the district attorney's office in a sealed envelope with a property receipt stapled to it, and Nadine Pomerleau had put every one of them back exactly where the index card said it went. The tutor from Skowhegan was at the long oak table with the book already open and her hands in her lap, because she had learned, in a good deal less than her first month, not to help. Gil sat down and put his finger under the line and read one sentence out loud, slowly, the whole way to the period. That's where we leave Detective Nathan Rowe, and where this story ends. If this one kept you guessing, consider subscribing to Detective Tales, and let us know in the comments where you first suspected the truth. It helps the channel more than you'd think, and it helps us know what's working. Now that the story is behind us, a few words on how it was built. The case turns on a theft that makes no sense as a theft. 4 missing folders have no subject, person, date, or dollar connecting them. What they share is a single initial. Because Verna filed the drawer in her own private order, the 4 S folders sit far apart. Whoever removed them had to work through the whole drawer and select by shape rather than meaning. That does not mean Everett Sabine was unable to read anything. After years with Verna, he could read familiar material slowly, and he had learned a great deal. The distinction is pressure. New handwriting still stopped him, and a memorized signature was not the same thing as recognizing an unfamiliar block label at a glance. Alone in the room after Verna's fall, terrified of being found there, he trusted the first letter of his own name and no more. The second negative clue is that none of the 4 folders is the one he wanted. The anonymous learner files were in a separate locked drawer he had never seen Verna open. On the night of her death, she told him she had mailed an award nomination containing his name without receiving his permission. He went home, sat with that knowledge, and returned. The mill camera eventually shows the whole shape of the decision: an ordinary trip to the lesson, a trip home, and then a second trip back. The surviving folders matter for the same reason. In the first minutes, Everett could not know whether he had taken the paper he feared. By Tuesday, he knew none of the 4 was his lesson work, but he still could not read what they were, and he could not bring himself to destroy 4 pieces of Verna's records without knowing whose lives or work they contained. Their survival lets the case be produced, rather than merely confessed. And the $340 remain exactly what they looked like at the beginning, irrelevant to the person who entered that room. The money was within reach, but he had not come for money. He had come for one piece of paper with his own name on it, the one thing in the building he was least able to find quickly. Thank you again for listening. I'm Jason Fraser. Until next time.